Thank you very much, Sam. So, as mentioned, my name is Michael Noonan. Uh, my talk today centers around design and technology education and the role that it has had in responding to the PPE shortage nationwide. So, overview here today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about my story, about how we got started with this whole effort, and how design and technology departments came together to try and collaborate and to try and cooperate so that we could respond adequately to fight the coronavirus. We're going to talk about the evolution in terms of how this initiative grew exponentially over the course of the 12 or so weeks we've been doing it. I'm going to talk about the three designs that became standardized for all design and technology departments to use. Uh, we faced quite a few challenges throughout the course of what we did here. I'm going to talk about how we overcame these challenges and the types of solutions that we developed for them, our lessons learned from the experience overall, and although we're not finished, what we've learned from the experience as we've gone on, the overall outcomes of the experience that design and technology departments have delivered, and then what I see as being the future in terms of future collaboration between design and technology departments having engaged in this particular effort. So a little bit about my story. I qualified in Ireland in 2013 as a woodwork and construction studies teacher from the University of Limerick. And like most of my peers at the time, I had to immigrate because there was little or no permanent job prospects at the time in our country because of an ongoing recession. I'm very interested in developing technologies and in additive manufacturing, particularly in recent years in 3D printing and robotics. I'm a bit sports mad, really. I'm very interested in rugby and in GAA, fitness and podcasts, as well as traveling when permitted, obviously not at the moment. And I'm a Chelsea fan. So myself and Ed might come into conflict with our differing football views. My motto to live by is that, and this is one I try and infuse really in our students in school, is that hard work trumps talent if talent doesn't work hard. And I'm paraphrasing slightly a famous basketballer called Kevin Durant. I've been working in Queen Elizabeth School since 2013 when I immigrated, first as an NQT and then going on to become a permanent member of staff, then becoming an extracurricular enrichment tutor before taking over the head of subject role almost 3 years ago. Since taking over, I've implemented a 5-year plan to try and upgrade the department facilities and to bring it into line with modern technology, particularly focusing on the implementation of 3D printing and robotics. DT in recent years in our school has gone through something of a renaissance. It surged in popularity from when it was previously on the wane. This is largely because of updates to the curriculum, a changing in teaching style, a massive upgrade in our facilities, and then success in the extracurricular sphere as well. We are a highly successful department, both academically and in the extracurricular world. We have been world robotic champion and numerous national champions about 4 times now. We've won many engineering competitions and competed in many engineering competitions, such as the Engineering Education Scheme. We massively promote the Arkwright Scholarship as well by the Small Peace Trust. So, taking a look at our starting point, where we really got going was the day that school closures were announced here in the UK on the 18th of March. I can remember it very clearly. We were in the workshop with about 40 or so students and all of our staff members here in the department. At the time, we knew that there was a government briefing due at 5 o'clock, and so we decided to show it live to the students in the department. I think they may have had a bet going as to when the school closures were going to be announced, so they were very keen to find out. And when it became clear to us that we were going to have to close on the 20th of March, we had gone from what was really operating at 100 miles an hour peak time in terms of our role as a design and technology department to suddenly coming to an almost complete and total stop. Students, teachers, there was a great feeling of almost helplessness and powerlessness amongst everybody in the department. And the immediate feeling amongst my colleagues and I was that there must be more that we can do. In the following days, I started to do some research into what people were doing to try and aid the coronavirus situations worldwide. I saw the prolific 3D printer, Joseph Prusa, inventor of the Prusa 3D printer in the Czech Republic, had began production of 10,000 units for the Czech Ministry of Health in Prague. I also saw that Colin Keogh, who's an engineering lecturer in UCD in Ireland, had begun working on an open source project on a variety of different strands, from ventilators to face masks, to try and aid the situation in my own country. I saw that Copper 3D, who were a distributor and maker of both 3D designs and 3D printing filament based in Colombia, had started to create their own mask as well. And all of these examples had commonality in the sense that it was about sharing expertise. It was about sharing these out so they could become crowd projects. It was about everything being open source so that anyone could access it if they had the appropriate tools and expertise. And it was about being not for profit so that there could be a difference made to the situation. Initially, having seen some of these examples, I decided that I would try and make the Prusa design, the RC2 at the time, and the Copper 3D mask just for staff members in school. As we had announced closure on the 20th, we were due back on the 23rd for an all-staff briefing in terms of what the arrangements going forward were. And many staff members had expressed an interest in getting some of this equipment from me for any future teaching in whatever shape that might take. Over the course of the weekend between closure and coming back, it dawned on me that if we were to form a group or an effort or some form of a banner under which all DT departments could operate, we could pool together our resources and expertise, and we could make a much more significant difference nationwide. It was at that point that I started the design and technology education against the coronavirus, against the spread of the coronavirus group that you can see in your center image there. Initially, it was just about inviting friends, spreading the word amongst colleagues past and present, and getting DT departments with whom staff members I was personally familiar with involved so that we could make a difference in our own area. It was posted online to Twitter. It was shared on Facebook and many of the other main design and technology groups, such as the Data and World Association of Technology Teachers groups. And the starting point really was posting online of links, of advice, of plans in terms of what departments had already started doing, in terms of what they had seen online, sharing ideas, particularly design ideas, and any other resources we could. It was at that point, when I was researching resources to share online, that I came across the open source COVID-19 project, as previously mentioned, that involved Colin Keogh in the UK and Ireland. And it was from that group that I managed to spot a Slack invite for what was at the time a fledgling 3D crowd. Having joined in there, I immediately got the feeling, it was in around the 25th of March at this stage, that this group seemed to have a very coherent plan, seemed to have great collegiality. There was great direction in terms of what was happening. There seemed to be an awful lot of industry experts, and I decided that this was certainly the mast I wanted to nail my colours to, and that I wanted to get my department involved with. At around this time, both of these groups began to grow exponentially. Movements began nationwide, commencing in that week after we had started closure of the schools. There was agreements to speak with press about what we were doing. Other departments were reaching out to try and get publication of it. And in around that time, as a result of David Sims's talk with the BBC, my own foray into media duties with the Times, lots of other DT departments and makers sharing and liking and doing as much publicity as they possibly could in terms of sharing the efforts that we were doing, there was a huge surge in membership of both of these groups. That then leads us to the evolution of what happened next. Teachers all over the country began making masks, visors, and equipment, such as door openers. They began donating PPE to hospitals from PPE that they had in-house for their own departments. For instance, we donated 500 sets of eye protectors from the DT and science departments to our local GP trust. At this point, because of the efforts of so many different departments with a variety of equipment and a variety of expertise, we saw many different designs beginning to appear, satisfying the needs of those people who had been inquiring for them. Right from the off, the Design and Technology Association, through Tony Ryan, their CEO, and Ryan Ball, who was an educational trainer there, were involved with the effort. They were tweeted early on, and they wanted to help coordinate with the control of what we were doing in the group. They wanted to help create guidelines, which meant that quality could be controlled and assured from DT departments. And we wanted to really ensure that we could uphold high standards for all of our departments so that what we were doing was safe as well as practicable in helping with the crisis. Tony and his colleagues began to contact their local MPs to lobby nationalising this effort through the Department of Education. The thought process was that of the 5,000 or so DT departments nationwide, we could suddenly transform them into a production line where there was already massive shortages in PPE, and we could become an auxiliary manufacturing company to help those who are already stretched to their limits. At that point, recommendations and best practice began appearing online in our group. Schools began dedicating entire departments to their effort, ensuring that enormous scaling up of efforts and contacts were being used outside of the department with industrial partners, but very careful and conscious effort to maintain social distancing within the departments was done at that time. And they were also ensuring that they were wearing PPE and cleaning the PPE themselves. We began to see hospitals ordering directly from schools instead of from their suppliers, initially in quite small volumes and then with an enormous increase in volume, with the example in the bottom right-hand side getting an order of 500 in their very first week. It was at this point that we decided that 3 designs had to be settled upon. The snippet that you can see at the very top of your screen there is from CLEAPS, who are an advisory board for DT and science departments. And they had suggested initially, as I'll mention in challenges, that production should stop. But eventually they decided that in collaboration with DT and many other experts around the country, 3 designs could have been decided upon. The 3 designs that you can see are the 3D printed design on the left-hand side, which is the Prusa RC3. The major advantage of anyone working with this, in terms of a DT perspective, was that there was an SOP in place which ensured that everybody adhered to the same practice guidelines. This was a huge reassurance for DT departments all over the country, with whom there was a slight worry in terms of liability should there be any faults with these. The one that we see in the middle was designed by Roger Newman and a former colleague of mine, Charlie Munro, working in Birchwood High in Bishop Stortford. They, on their first day of production, were able to make 200, and they were quickly able to scale up production to about 300 a day. It used a combination of machines, riveting, line cutters and laser cutters. And although it involved a bit more manpower than some other designs, they were still able to produce more than enough for their local COVID hot centres and hospitals. This design was adopted by quite a few departments all over the country because of the lesser demand on equipment. What proved to be the most popular design is the design we see on the right-hand side. This was designed by Smoke and Mirrors, who are a laser cutting company who work in collaboration with Kitronic, who are an electronics kit, education electronics kit company. That design was purely based on laser cutting. The transparent shield that you can see the man wearing in the right-hand picture and the polypropylene headband that you can see him wearing, there's no external components. It's all laser cut. It's very easy to tessellate onto large sheets of material, and speed was absolutely brilliant with that design. So that quickly became a very popular design, also because laser cutters are more widely available than, for instance, 3D printers in departments. Some schools immediately became able to produce in very high volumes and at a higher pace, especially when they combined more than one of these designs. The way it tended to work was that the laser cut and the handmade designs in some cases went to local key workers, when the 3D printed design with the very specific SOP went to COVID hot centres and hospitals who were really in need of very exact and well-controlled PPE in terms of the hygienic practices being used. So our challenges that we faced, as previously mentioned, CLEAPS initially advised in the document you can see on the right-hand side in their online publications that DT departments should not produce PPE. They were quite right, really, with this recommendation because of the potential liability that people could face if there was any complications in terms of the quality of what was being produced. However, through later collaboration with both data and the subject experts, as mentioned, with things like the SOP that 3D Crowd were able to present, and other safeguarding measures that the other designers were able to present, they changed their guidance to reflect that there was 2 or 3 recommended designs that could have been stuck with. The next challenge that we began to face was that of material shortages, and this was an enormous challenge for the 3D Crowd printers, the DT departments and makers all over the country. Departments began using it faster than it could be delivered or than it could be bought. Data reached out, as well as some other teachers, to some industrial contacts to source donations of materials at a huge scale, and this began being sent out. In the top right-hand side, we can see that Dentford donated 450 reels of PLA to be shipped out to 3D Crowd, and in the bottom right-hand side, this is a tweet from Kitronic to say at one point, after purchasing an excess bulk of polypropylene, which was for making the visors for the Smoke and Mirrors design, they had sent out enough material to make 1 million visors. The next challenge that faced many departments was the speed at which they could produce these designs. Although they were doing their absolute utmost, and in many cases working around the clock to produce the PPE required for their local NHS centres, demand was still far exceeding supply, which was something common that we also experienced with 3D Crowd. Some innovative and some very savvy heads of subjects at Merchant Taylors and Oakham School, who are Andrew Duffy and Timothy Weston, respectively, they used local and alumni contacts in the flooring and injection molding industry to massively scale up their operations. And what they did then is they collaborated with other schools so that teachers who didn't have any of the equipment capable of manufacturing the PPE shown in the earlier slides could get some of these laser cut and mass manufactured laser cut and injection molded designs, and they could assemble them together, they could package them up, and they could send them to their local NHS centres despite not having the equipment. In terms of numbers, Merchant Taylors, in partnership with Amtico Flooring, were able to produce about 20,000 a day. Over the course of about 2 weeks, they managed to make somewhere between 60 to 100,000. Oakham School, which is Timothy's school in Rutland, partnering with Rutland Plastics, managed to produce around 30,000 units, which they sent out to local centres all over Leicestershire and Northamptonshire. The next challenge that many of us faced was cleanliness and social distancing, and maintaining this within our DT departments. However, the DT departments themselves, given their size and scale, as well as schools with facilities such as sports halls and large classrooms, turned out to be the perfect space which could be used, especially over the closure of the Easter break, where there was very few staff on site, which could bring potential contaminants into where you were working. The image that you see in the bottom there is my own food technology room, which was used as a cleaning station when we changed our hub into the role of cleaning hub. You can see the face masks drying all over the room there, being hung into the kind of dish dryer areas. Out of shot are the basins that we purchased for cleaning these in the Milton solution. So, and obviously the room itself is ventilated in terms of an external power source anyway. So really, an awful lot of schools around the country had the perfect facilities in-house right from the off for helping out with this. Some schools which use these departments, as mentioned, Merchant Taylors and Oakham, but also Parliament School here in London, St Paul's Girls' School, Great City Academy, Belmont Prep School, and our own school, Queen Elizabeth School, used their and dedicated their DT departments to this effort over the course of this time. In terms of lessons learned, we learned that one platform is best for all. Slack worked extremely well for 3D Crowd and for the tech-savvy makers, but it was quite hard to convince teachers who were already operating on Microsoft Teams, on Zoom, and many other platforms to commit to using this. So what we found to be a more effective tool for communicating and coordinating the school's effort was the Facebook group, and in some cases using Zoom with our own 11 students who were making here for us in school. We also learned that variety brings a major challenge to production. The variety of machine, of setting, material, expertise, and staff in hand proved to be a major obstacle. But the platform of the Facebook group that we established was a major advantage in this sense, in that people, in as nice a way as possible, would advise each other on best approach. We also learned within that group that best work really needs to be highlighted. And we saw some incredible efforts from schools who highlighted manufacturing units in the thousands and thousands all over the country. And this, in turn, helped to foster healthy competition, a communal work ethic, and encouragement to continue on. We learned that shared wisdom is more powerful than keeping that wisdom at hand, which we saw from many of our experts sharing their advice on the variety of machine and setting. And we learned that partnership is key in getting your voice heard. Our partnership with Data, which brought forward partnership with the Royal Academy of Engineering in securing materials and prominence in terms of our voice. And then our partnership with Need to Chat here in Barnet, for instance, with the delivery of our face shields all over the locality, and our fantastic partnership in the London area and nationwide with the Bike Shed MCC in terms of collection and delivery of the parts that we were making. In terms of our outcomes, on last count, 356,000 units of PPE had been made, donated, and sent to healthcare practices worldwide. This was done on the 30th of April, the poster that we see on the right-hand side. So my estimate is that the real number is certainly in excess of 500,000. We were able to use this crisis as an opportunity for an educational tool. Conal Kelly, a teacher on our group, created a resource based on all of the efforts that he was able to see from the various efforts of schools around the country. And we were able to set challenges from some of our students to mock up the same actions that we were doing. School children who had printers at home, such as those in Haberdashers, QE, St. Paul's Girls, and one particular student in my own school who made over 600 units on his own, they were able to get involved in the effort, and they, which was an enormous advantage for them, got to experience what life was like in a fledgling manufacturing company and understand what it would mean to help those around them with their skills and experience. We were also able to show those students the role which engineers could have in improving the world around them, which after all is the core principle of becoming an engineer. I believe it had an incredible outcome in terms of the reputational gain for design and technology. For instance, where we can see the Independent article on the left-hand side, quoting that 200,000 pieces of PPE for frontline healthcare staff had been made by DT departments. DT itself has been a subject in decline, but the hope is that the efforts of the teachers and the departments nationwide and the impact that they've had can produce an increase in popularity and relevance for this subject. Another outcome is our manufacturing and our introduction as an auxiliary supply line and an auxiliary PPE company when those who were tasked with that particular job were exhausted in terms of their resources and materials. Our advantage was that we were able to innovate and alter our designs to suit our end user on a bespoke basis and based on the materials that we had in hand. In a sense, we were the ultimate QRM, quick response manufacturer model, and the publicity that we gained with various different sources managed to publish our ability to do that. As mentioned, the partnerships were an enormous advantage for us, and many DT departments all over the country will look to continue to promote that and continue to bring that to hand to show students the power of partnerships. And over 530 members joined our group worldwide and were able to share their ideas. We had teachers from America, teachers from Argentina, teachers from Australia sharing their ability to help out in this particular challenge worldwide. We now also see in terms of outcomes that a model exists where DT departments can quickly collaborate and respond to global crises, and that the history of what we've done here won't be forgotten. And one of the key aspects, one of the key advantages that we've gained from this is a huge resource gain for schools in need, not just in terms of knowledge, but also one of our main manufacturing hubs here in London, which was the Cisco Meraki hub in central London, which was headed up by Patrick Coleman, kindly donated 20 3D printers to schools who couldn't afford to 3D print or didn't have the facilities to 3D print with this effort. They're also hoping to share knowledge of these machines, but most critically of all, they're helping them to establish a STEM curriculum which can be enriched by the provision of these machines in their school. In terms of where do I see this going? So as mentioned, the resource and knowledge gain for schools has been absolutely incredible in terms of how it can help us. Educational collaboration with 3D Crowd and the Design and Technology Association is something that I would love to see. I'd love to see, as mentioned in the previous talk, the setting of potential challenges for students using some of the resources and models that we have developed and what we've done with 3D Crowd and Design and Technology, giving talks and linking experts with schools. I hope that in the future there's a renewed faith in DT as a subject and in its popularity, an increase similar to what we've seen in our own school, and that the relevance and the skills of DT are really made obvious to students now. I hope that future global challenges such as potential pandemics, as mentioned in the previous talk, the need for prosthetics, also the sustainability challenge for everyone in DT, that group projects can now easily be collaborated and dealt with in a well-equipped and savvy group and a quick timescale. Competitions and challenges such as those set by Autodesk and Tinkercad are a way of encouraging students to get involved with this. I hope that we can continue to use the valuable industrial contacts that we've built up to deliver talks and set challenges as mentioned, but I believe that the main gain in the future of DT here is inspiring the next generation for the difference that engineering can make, and also knowing that in our actions and what we've done, that we've been able to do our bit and play our role in helping to protect the NHS and other key workers during this time. So thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Thanks very much, Michael. So we've got one question from Elle about what other projects do you use the 3D printers for in school?
Sure. So probably we use them at almost every age group now. I mean, a few years ago, it would have been the sole resource for A-level students, but now we have year 7 students designing chairs on CAD and 3D printing them. Year 8 students designing F1 cars on CAD and 3D printing them. Year 9 students this year, were actually designing for end users with maybe disabilities or certain needs, and they were 3D printing their end resources there. At GCSE, we use it to 3D print our NEAs. We use it in our A-level NEAs. We use it in our extracurricular projects, such as the BIEA STEM Challenge, the Shell Challenge, with Vex Robotics. And as well as that, we also have a 3D printing club here in school where students can just come in and freewheel design whatever it is that they want on CAD, collaborate with some more expert students in terms of CAD and 3D printing in the sixth form, and then they just send us the file online, and one of either our technology assistant or one of the teachers will 3D print it and send it out.
Fantastic. We've also got one other question from Stephen of what's the next new technology that you'd like to bring into DT departments?
I think talking with my own DT department, I would love to get AI in our robotics. There's been a new release of an AI-based competition in robotics. Um, I'd love to have something like that involved. I'd love to get a bit of STL or resin printing so that we can get more accurate and more technically complex printing in. I'd love to get really strong 3D scanning made available to schools, so that we can, for instance, iteratively model with modeling materials such as plaster Paris or blue foam, transform that into CAD, and then that is an editable free form, and then it can be transformed back into something which can be 3D printed. Um, yeah, and I actually think that really, in terms of educational technology, obviously the situation that's going on now has been a huge challenge for teachers everywhere. But talking from my own perspective, I've seen the value in what some online resources can provide, whether that's with quick Zoom meetings. I'm discussing with my year 12 form at the moment in terms of their future prospects and careers, helping them out with their UCAS references and their UCAS personal statement. The ability to have a conversation online is really, really useful. But having said that, I still think that it will never take the place of face-to-face teaching. So I think that the real pace of development of online resources and teaching has been brilliant, and I think that there's going to be even more there in terms of sharing and collaboration. But all of my students say the same thing. They really miss being able to speak to someone, and they miss the kind of conversation which you can have in person. So whilst we're gaining an awful lot from the current situation and the resources that are out there, there is no substitute for the kind of classroom environment.
Fantastic. We've got one more from Mary of how many in the end did this project produce?
So in terms of DT departments, I'm not sure whether it's safer to say we stopped counting or we lost count, but 30th of April was our last count, and that was 356,000. So my estimate is well in excess of 500,000. If we were talking about 3D crowd, obviously the numbers are quite high as well. Again, I think I've lost count on that, but I believe it's in around the 175,000 mark. Looking at my own school in terms of logging our numbers, I think we were in excess of 6,000, or my own area, in excess of 6,000, my own school, in excess of 4,000 between those manufactured and cleaned when we took the role as a cleaning hub. So yeah, you have various metrics of measurement there. But I think really the most important one when we look at it now is that, people are saying that, you've given us the PPE that we need, and that we are now ready to respond to a second wave. We're not spinning up the whole process and falling behind the curve. We are certainly ahead of the curve if there were to be a second wave, or if there were to be a secondary need for these pieces of equipment. I think that's the most important metric really, is that supply can meet demand very easily now.